So today we'll be discussing about consumer behavior, and in this we will discuss certain definitions which have been given by researchers and authors, which um, I believe we should be aware of before we proceed further. So first let us look at the first definition of consumer behavior that I'll be sharing with you. And according to it, consumer behavior is the behavior that consumers display in searching for, purchasing, using, evaluating, and disposing of products and services that they expect will satisfy their needs. For example, you must have noted that in case of a toothpaste, we are interested in knowing in general, not only regarding toothpaste, as for example, as marketers or as students of consumer behavior, that what are we buying basically? Why are we buying things? When are we buying? Where are we buying those things? How often do we buy? And how often do we actually use those products or things that we buy? So from the point of view of toothpaste, you'll note several examples are there before you on the screen. Here we have Miswak, Aquafresh, Sensodyne, Colgate, Ved Shakti, Babool, and so on. So you must have noted that each of these is being sold, highlighting a unique attribute that we can refer to as the USP, which each of them claims. For example, in case of a toothpaste, the type of toothpaste is important. For example, some consumers prefer to use a gel-based toothpaste. Others, prefer to buy toothpaste which is being offered, for example, in a plastic tube. Others want to buy a toothpaste which is being offered in a metallic or a flexi tube. Similarly, some of them will be buying a national brand, others will be buying a local or generic brand. Some of them, if you ask that why are you using a toothpaste, you will know that they will reply that it can help in preventing cavities. Some of them will say that it will help in preventing or removal of stains from their teeth. Others will say it will brighten their teeth. And interestingly, some of the consumers often also use toothpaste as a mouthwash. So as friends of consumer behavior or as marketers, you can say that we are interested in knowing that where exactly is the consumer buying this particular toothpaste. Is she buying it at the supermarket, or is it at the convenience store, or is it at the drugstore? And how often is that toothpaste being used? Is it being used after every meal, or is it being used, for example, once a day before the person goes to sleep, or is it being used once a week? So how, and of course on that will depend at how frequently the consumer engages in purchasing this particular toothpaste. So it can be say a bi-weekly purchase if the person is a heavy user. It can be a monthly purchase if the person is a light user, or it can be a weekly purchase if the person is a medium user. So these are some interesting things that we are interested in knowing about the consumer. Then another definition of consumer behavior which has been given by researchers is that consumer behavior is the study of decision-making units and the process involved in acquiring, consuming, and disposing of goods, services, experiences, and ideas. So here you will note that the focus is on decision-making units and the process involved. So since the consumers, they make decisions either as individuals or as groups. So we want to know that whether the person decided on buying a particular product individually, or was it a group decision. For example, take the case of a family. Now, in case of a family, especially I'm talking of the current families and the current setup that we have. So we have more of a democratic setup, you will agree, in the current context. So here what's happening is that as such, it's very difficult for anybody to force one's decision on other family members. So if a decision is to be taken regarding, for example, say a vacation, so some kind of discussion will definitely take place in the family before it's finally decided that where exactly the family will go for the vacation. And another thing is that this definition is that consumption is a process. Now, this process starts with acquisition phase, and it moves on to the consumption phase, and then towards the end there is a disposition phase or a stage. So we are interested in knowing that what's happening during each of these phases or stages, because it can give us some interesting insights into how consumer is behaving, and as a marketer, what can be done to address the needs of the consumer, and also to attract the attention of the consumer. Then there are two terms about which we should be aware of. One is who is the customer and who is a consumer. The customer term is typically used to refer to someone who regularly purchases from a particular store or company. While as far as while the term consumer refers to anyone engaging in any of the activities used in the definition of consumer. So this is the difference as far as these two terms are concerned. Now, another thing that we should be aware of is that, what's the difference between the two terms initiator and influencer. An initiator, remember, will be a person who determines that some need or want is not being met and authorizes the purchase to rectify that particular situation. So that particular individual will be referred to as initiator. Now, another term is influencer. Now, as the term itself indicates, it's a person who, by some intentional or unintentional word or action, may be influencing purchase decision, actual purchase decision, or the use of the product or service. Now, another two terms which frequently keep popping up as far as this literature on consumer behavior is concerned is the term buyer and user. So we should be familiar and we should be aware of the differences between these two terms also. Buyers are not always the users or the only users. So the person who actually makes a purchase may be user, may be non-user, and or the only user. Now take the case of a mother who buys a toy for the child or the children in the family. So the toy is being purchased by the mother, but the actual user is the child. She similarly may be buying food for dinner or lunch, and she may be one of the users. She may also be consuming it. So she may be one of the users. So she may buy a handbag. She may buy, for example, some personal grooming product, for example, a lipstick. And in that case, she may be the only user. Before we proceed, I'll also like you to think about that why exactly are we, discussing this term consumer behavior, and why are we interested in consumer, who these consumers are, what are their numbers as far as countries are concerned or regions are concerned. So in this, I would like to cite the examples of two countries. In fact, one I'll take the case of the US, and the other I'll discuss about India. So when we discuss about US, we should be asking ourselves But what is the size of the US market, for example, this consumer market? Another question is that what is the percentage of whites, the percentage of African Americans, what is the percentage of Asians living or for example, Latin Americans who are living in US, what percentage of the US population is urbanized, what percentage is living in rural areas, uh, which state is the most populous, or which city is the most populous, what is the composition of the US population in terms of ancestry, because you all are aware that quite substantial number of or percentage of US population, you may be aware that they basically come to US. It's said to be a melting pot from various other countries of the world during the last several hundred years. And one more interesting question that it came to my mind was that when was the first census carried out as far as US was concerned? So now let us try to find answers to these questions. So as far as the size of the American market is concerned, so I just I searched and I found that in terms of numbers, we have around 33 crores or 330 um, million people who are living in US or within the geographic boundaries of US, and this figure is from September 1, 2020. As far as the whites and the African Americans and Asians are concerned, roughly 72% of the US population comprises whites, and 12% are African Americans, and around 5% or 4.4% to be precise are Asians. 82% of the population in US lives in urban centers or suburbs. As far as the global rate, if we compare, is concerned, it is 54%. That is 54% is the urbanization rate globally. The two states, that is Texas and California, are the most populous in US, and New York is the most populous city in US. In terms of ancestry, it's interesting to note that roughly 15.2 or roughly 16% of the US population has German ancestry. Around 11% has Irish ancestry, and African Americans are around, say, 9%. English, or those who came from England, they are around 8.7%, and Americans from US, they are around 7.2%. And the answer to the last question, that is when was the first census carried out, is 1790. 1790, the first census was carried out, and it recorded 4 million Americans only. Now let us look at what is the scenario as far as India is concerned. In terms of size, all of us are aware that we have roughly 1.2 billion people living within the geographic boundaries of India. But one interesting thing that I wish to share with you is that around 2,000 ethnic groups live in India. 2,000 ethnic groups. So as far as diversity is concerned, so we have such a rich diversity. India occupies just 2.4% of the world's land area, but it supports over 17.5% of the world's population. More than 50% of the population of India is below 25 years of age, and more than 65% are below 35 years. It is expected that by the end of 2020, the average age of an Indian would be around 29 years. In terms of religious breakup or religious mix, that is people who are residing within India, so around 80.5 or 81% are Hindus. We have 13.4% or say around 14% Muslims, and we have around 2.5% Christians, and the Sikhs comprise 2%, or to be precise 1.9% of India's population. As far as those who are residing in villages is concerned, the 72% of India's population is residing in villages, and we have around I think 6,38,000 roughly villages in India, and the remaining population, that is around 27.8 or 28%, it lives in more than 5,100 towns in India, and over say around 380 urban centers that we call. Now this is as far as the 2011 census, or figures are from 2011. So still we don't have any figures from the census. So this is what the scenario is. Next, we'll discuss about the stimulus response model of buyer behavior. Again, I expect that in some form it must have been covered in your first semester, but I'll discuss it again here. So we will basically, we are trying to understand it, and before I actually start discussing stimulus response model of buyer behavior, I would like to share with you about another model, which is the economic man model, or which is discussed in several textbooks, which is one of the models which tries to explain that why we behave the way we behave as consumers. So the question that must be coming, or must come to your mind, is that are we active as far as we being consumers is concerned, or are we behaving passively when we are behaving as consumers, or fundamentally are we active or we are passive? So are we rational, are we emotional? How do we actually buy things? So let us try to find out something more about the economic man theory. Now, according to this economic man model, we act, I'll say we, because we all are consumers. The consumers are rational and act selfishly as consumers, always trying to maximize the benefits from the exchange process. We need to remember that this particular theory assumes that even the seller or the producer is also an economic man, and this seller or producer also tries to maximize the profit from the exchange that is happening with the buyer. So according to this model, consumers actively use information about all available options before they actually go in for a particular purchase decision. So this model may explain some consumer decisions, but it does not explain all. So there are issues, and there are controversies as far as this particular model is concerned. So in fact, you will agree that at times we make decisions which are irrational, or based on irrational factors. For example, sometimes we may be influenced heavily by word of mouth or e-word of mouth, that which is, for example, originating from our friends, from those who are around us, co-workers, for example. So it is said that we may be buying a certain thing simply because of the herd mentality. Now, this herd mentality, I think, must have raised certain flags, because this is a term which is nowadays frequently appearing in the context of the COVID virus also. So similarly, as consumers, we might choose something because of the herd mentality, rather than because it provides us the greatest objective value. So this may be happening. So similarly, many people are averse to change. So what they do is they continue using, or deciding or going in for suboptimal consumer choices, because they feel more comfortable with a choice which they see as being easier or safer from their point of view. Let us look at another interesting model, which is there on your screens. That is the stimulus response model of buyer behavior. Now, this stimulus response model of buyer behavior is or the black box model it is also referred to as the black box model in certain texts. It presents the consumer as a thinker, as a problem solver who responds to a range of external and internal factors when she or he is deciding whether to buy a certain thing, whether not to buy a certain thing. So the external stimuli to which we respond to include marketing mix and other environmental factors. So as far as the marketing mix is concerned, so we have the 4Ps before us. So they represent stimuli which basically are planned or they're originating from the company. Then we have the environmental stimuli which are supplied by the economic, political, technological, cultural circumstances, or for the situation in which that individual is. So together these factors, they present the external circumstances that help shape the consumer choices. The internal factors affecting consumer decisions, they are referred to as the black box. Now there is a reason why we will discuss that also, why we refer to this as the black box. So these exist inside the mind of the individual or the mind of the consumer or the buyer, and these include characteristics such as beliefs, such as values, such as motivation, such as lifestyle, and so many other things. So the decision-making process, you must be noting, is also part of this black box. As consumers come to recognize that they have a problem and they need to solve that particular problem, and this problem may be solved, for example, with the help of the purchase of a particular product. So we need to solve it, and as a consumer responds to external stimuli, their black box, process choices based on so as a consumer responds to these external stimuli, their black box processes choices based on internal factors, and what happens is that we decide on buying a certain thing or not buying a certain thing, that is purchasing it or not purchasing it. Interestingly, as far as see, this is the buyer response. So if you look at, of course, one of the responses can be that you decide not to buy it. So this is the linkage. This is the relationship that exists, and this is the box, buyer's black box. So like the economic man model that we discussed some time back, this model also assumes that regardless of what happens inside the black box, that is inside our mind, the consumer's response is a result of a conscious, rational decision process. So it is not an irrational process. It's a rational decision process. Now, many marketers, in fact, are skeptical of this assumption and think that, even certain researchers, they have posited that the consumers at times are tempted to make irrational or emotional buying decisions. In fact, marketers understand that this consumer's irrationality and the emotions are, what basically makes them amenable or susceptible to marketing stimuli, and because of which they are purchasing or going in for products and services from the marketers. So for this reason, consumer purchasing behavior is considered by many to be the mystery black box. This is how we can represent it. So when people themselves don't fully understand what drives their choices, the exchange process, you will agree, can be unpredictable and difficult for marketers to understand. Next, let us discuss the factors which influence the consumer behavior. You see, we have the buyer in the middle. And we will see that what are the factors which basically are influencing this buyer. So we have the cultural factors, which comprise of culture, subculture, social class. We have social factors, consist of reference groups, family, roles and status. Then we have the psychological factors, motivation, perception, learning, beliefs, attitudes. The personal factors, that is age and life cycle stage, occupation, economic situation, lifestyle, personality and self-concept. So they all they affect the behavior of the consumer, and one by one we'll be discussing these various factors a bit in detail. So first let us discuss about the cultural factors. It is said that the cultural factor exerts the broadest and the deepest influence on us. As far as the definition of culture is concerned, first let us go through the definition. See, culture is said to be a complex whole. It includes knowledge, it includes belief, it includes art, law, morals, customs, or you can say any other capabilities and habits acquired by you or by me or by humans. In general, we can say as a member of society. As far as culture is concerned, it is said that it is acquired. It does not include inherited responses and predispositions. And I think you'll appreciate that if we have two twins from the same two twins from the same country, they are there, and suppose one of them has been taken to another country, say one is stays in India, the other is taken to US, and suppose they are brought up. So you will agree that because they have been or they are being raised in different cultures, their outlook towards things will be different. And that is why we need to appreciate, that is why it is said that culture is something which is not inherited. Had it been inherited, these two twins would have preferred to purchase exactly the same type of clothing, exactly the same type of food. But if the situation that I've shared, if that continues, if they are separated, if they are brought up in these two different places, so you will agree that the kind of food that they will prefer, the kind of clothes that they'll be wearing will be different because they are being raised in what we call two different cultural settings. A culture is said to be a comprehensive concept. In fact, it is said that almost everything that influences an individual's thought process and behavior is part of culture. Culture, interestingly, supplies boundaries within which we think and act. So, culture is said to set the boundaries or the norms on behavior. So, what are norms? Norms are derived from values. Now, there are, what are cultural values? Cultural values, they are widely held beliefs that affirm the desirable. I'm repeating. The cultural values, they are widely held beliefs that affirm the desirable, and in case you attempt to or you violate these, then it can result in some kind of sanctions on you. Now, in this context, I'd like to share two interesting terms here with which we otherwise are very familiar, that is time and physical distance. But time means different things to different people depending upon the culture to which they belong. So let us discuss that what these differences are. See, our attitude to time may differ depending upon our culture in very significant ways. For example, being late for an appointment or taking long time to get down to business is an accepted norm in the context of countries which are around the Mediterranean Sea. Countries, for example, which are less developed and which are part of Asia. Countries, for example, around the Arabian Peninsula. In the Japanese For example, say train system. Uh, what why I just suddenly brought the Japanese train system is, see, the concept of time and the attitude towards time changes drastically the moment we move to countries like Japan. So uh, we have countries like US, countries like Japan, we have countries like Switzerland, we have countries like England. Now here, what you will notice that they're all said to be punctuality conscious. And in the especially in the context of Japan, on time in the context of train refers to expected delay of less than a minute. So if the delay is more, then they have violated. There will be punishment. There will be sanctions against those who are responsible for running that train, because 1 minute is the maximum, uh, you know, uh, delay that can occur. While in many countries, you will appreciate, and I think ours is one of those countries, where if a train comes, say, after 15 minutes, then it is on time. If it comes after 1 hour, it is on time, because we are so used to delays, and we, in fact, our attitude to time is very different. So in this, there is another term that is for orientation towards time, what we call the time orientation. It is one way of looking at cultural attitudes to time, and uh, uh, the time orientation of a culture affects how it values time and the extent to which it believes it can control time. Now, there are certain cultures who believe that yes, we have, we can control time, and they are said to be future oriented. For example, America is often considered to be future oriented as compared to the more present oriented uh, cultures or countries like, say, France. And to compare to these two, we have Britain, which is said to be past oriented. So we have future oriented US, we have present oriented France. These are the examples, and we have the past oriented example is Britain. So, but often this a past orientation arises in cultures which have a long history. For example, cultures like India, cultures like China, and a future orientation you will find is found in countries which are said to be relatively young countries, like for example US. If you compare the history of US and history of a country like ours or China, so they are young. They don't have history in comparison to what we have. So as far as future-oriented cultures are concerned, they tend to run their lives by the clock. So in fact, US is said to be one of the fastest paced countries in the world. Partly it can be said because of the fact that Americans are always looking to the future, and this is what they call the American dream, striving for the American dream. So it is a culture that values busyness. This is not business, I'm saying busyness, which equates a hectic lifestyle with success, which equates a hectic lifestyle with status, and it also is considered to be associated with importance of that individual who leads that kind of lifestyle. Now, Japan is said to be extremely time conscious culture. Although the Japanese, probably lay more emphasis on time management and efficient lifestyles if you compare them to Americans. And consequently, they may feel less constantly rushed and frustrated because they believe more in managing time and being more efficient. Now then we as we discussed, we also have past oriented cultures like ours. So we have a laid back kind of attitude. Unlike in Japan, it is not unusual, as I was sharing with you, for trains to be late by several hours or even a full day, and it doesn't create any stress in us. It doesn't lead to any kind of turmoil. We are so used to it. So it is possible that such cultures with thousands of years of history behind them have a long point of view. The time at the scale of minutes or even hours becomes insignificant or inconsequential. Because when we think of time, we have such a history which is thousands of years of history behind us. So minutes, hours, they don't seem they're not important for us at all. Now then we have other cultures which are referred to as pre-industrial cultures. So now pre-industrial cultures, they are said to be having no time orientation at all. So or little time orientation. So they in fact exhibit not so much a relaxed attitude. Time has no attitude at all. So we have, for example, a tribe known as Piraha tribe in Amazon rainforest. So they have very limited language based on humming and whistling. So their language is very limited as far as number of words are concerned. So they have no numbers, letters or art, no words for colors, no specific religious beliefs, and no creation myth. So they also do not appear to have any, real concept of time. That is the most interesting thing. They have no real concept of time. So in fact, the surprising thing is that their culture does not have a past tense. So language has no past tense as such. And everything exists for them only in the present. That is the most interesting thing about this particular tribe. And when they can no longer perceive something, it basically ceases to exist from their point of view. Now, this takes us to the term chronemics. Now, chronemics is basically the study of use of time and the way that time is perceived by and valued by individuals and cultures, and particularly as regards the non-verbal communication. So these time perceptions include things like punctuality, willingness to wait, for example, approaches to face-to-face interactions. For example, in case you are experiencing any kind of time pressures, how do you react to it? So all these are covered under this chronemics. Different cultures, may be considered to be either monochronic. Monochronic is where things are typically done one at a time. So they will not do several things at the same time. One at a time they will be doing. So time, this means, will be segmented into precise small units where time is scheduled, arranged and managed. So in such a culture, time is generally viewed as a tangible commodity that can be spent, that can be saved or wasted, and a paramount value is placed on schedules, tasks, that is getting the job done. So this perception of time is basically, I think, rooted, as researchers have suggested, in the industrial revolution of the 18th and the 19th centuries. And the examples are, typical examples you can say are US, Germany, Switzerland, to which we can also add countries like Canada, Britain, Japan, South Korea, Turkey, and Norway, Finland, and so on. Then we have certain cultures which are said to be polychronic. So where several things can be done at once. So in fact, their approach to time is more fluid if you compare them to the monochronic cultures. So such cultures, in fact, they tend to be less focused on precise accounting of each and every moment, and they are in fact more you can say in a way steeped in tradition and in relationships, and tasks are not that important. Relationships are more important there. So polychronic cultures have much less formality or formal perception of time, they do not have precise calendars. They do not have precise schedules. So the arbitrary division of clock time and calendars have little importance from their point of view than the cycle of um, seasons, the rural community life, and the calendar of religious festivities. So we have, several countries like in Latin America, for example. We have in Africa, we have the Asian countries in Asia, we have the Arab cultures. They all fall in this category. And especially the cultures like those in Mexico, India, Pakistan, rural China, Philippines, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, they are all examples of this. Then we have variably monochronic, a group which is somewhere in between, that is these two that we have discussed just now. So they include the Russian culture, they include Southern Europe, and as much as, I think Eastern Europe was also part of it. So this was something interesting about the perception of time and how time is viewed by various cultures. Another term that is appearing there is physical distance. I think you must have noted that the physical distance between individuals, between genders, when they are having a discussion, be it face to face or when they are close to each other, you'll find that this physical distance also varies between cultures. So in fact, a lot of interesting studies also being done in this domain. So that is beyond the scope of discussion. I'll not go deeper into it. Then, are we aware of cultural influences? No, the interesting thing is that we are not. We are not aware of the cultural influences. So we behave like others because it seems so natural for us that this is the right thing for us to do, and that is why we are doing that thing. So we are not aware of the cultural influences, but it is influencing our behavior. Culture is taken for granted unless something so rapidly changes that it is noted. But we should appreciate that culture is not static. It is evolving. It is changing slowly over time. But at times what happens is that some major changes may happen in relatively short time periods. It may happen because of technological changes. It may happen because of conflicts between existing value systems, or maybe exposure to another culture's values, or it may happen because of God forbid, a war. So we need to understand that both existing cultural values and emerging cultural values, what is happening to them, because that can help us in spotting cultural shifts. Now, another trend which has been, or which should be interesting from our point of view, is that what is happening as far as these so-called cultural trends are concerned and how they are affecting the behavior of buyers in India. I think you will agree that there is a concern about health and fitness. You will find that there is increasing demand for exercise equipment, for clothing, for foods which are low calorie foods, which, for example, services which are, say, for example, gyms, for example, health clubs, and so on. So we have, and there is shift towards informality. You will find that there is a growing demand for casual clothing. You will find that there is growing demand for lighter entertainment. Then there is desire for leisure time. Now, what implications it has for marketers? The demand for convenience products is growing. You will find that the demand for products like microwave ovens, washing machines, it is growing. Demand for products like fast foods is growing. Packaged foods is growing. Then we have dual income families that are becoming the norm. So the moment we have dual income families, it means that they have deeper pockets. So they are bound to affect their ability to buy. They are bound to affect their ability as far as brands are concerned, choice of products is concerned, time available for purchase is concerned, and so on. So maybe you will find that because of this, more of purchases may be happening online. Then shift from emotions to benefits. So friendship, use the term friendship, is no longer only about emotions. It is also about transaction that this relationship enables. I'm repeating, the transaction that this relationship enables. So there is a shift from emotions to benefits. So we have feel the need for connecting to a broader network of friends, broader network of friends, and 93%, in fact, teenagers said that they offered advice to their friends and families on mobile phones. Now we have, studies which have been done globally as also in India, where it has been found that we are more self-indulgent now. That is reflected in friendship and friends that we have. So to stay in touch has become the latest phenomena. But this to stay in touch, of course, even before the COVID, to stay in touch didn't mean that you will be meeting regularly face to face. Staying in touch meant that you will be in digital touch or digital touchship with those individuals. Now, friendship is no longer only about emotions; it's also about transactions. So we have, several internet companies which are riding piggyback on friends. So we have an interesting example of Gmail, for example. If you recall, initially Gmail was by invitation only, and by invitation, if one friend could send an invite, certain number of invites, limited number of invites to other friends, and this is how it became popular. Then we have the example of employee referrals for hiring. So this is a very interesting example of how this, this concept of friends and friendship is basically helping companies in hiring. So firms are exploring these relationships, and they are using or employing these relationships to hire the right person, to hire individuals whom they have found are more effective, who are more productive from the point of view of their organizations. So in fact, researchers have found that 82% of the companies said that their employee referral programs provided the best returns on investment among the recruitment strategies. Then 88% said that these programs generated the best quality hires. That is, those people who were recruited, they were best in quality. I'm saying 88% accepted that they were the best. 30% of the candidates said that I'm saying 30% of the candidates, they said that employee referral programs are a valuable source for finding a new career opportunity. Then we had 43% of referred candidates were more likely to refer to other potential candidates. So this is how it grows, just like a snowball. So 35% of employees provide the referrals to help their friends and connections, and 32%, in fact, they said that we did so as to help their company, according to a study that was done by LinkedIn. So this shows that employees are not primarily motivated by monetary incentives that are often, integral part of these referral programs. In fact, one interesting example of this successful referral programs or use of this particular strategy is Accenture. So this, professional services company, so it has used this very effectively. And during the application process, the candidates, they can indicate that whether they will be part of this program. So if they agree to be part of this program, their Facebook accounts or LinkedIn accounts or their profiles, they are scanned by the company, and their friends are regularly being tracked, so that if the company finds that any of them can be of use to the company, so they are offered job positions within this organization. This is an example of this use of the concept of or friendship machine, which they use initially in several Latin American countries. So this was an special outdoor campaign by Coca-Cola somewhere in 2010. So what they did was they installed a 3.5 meter tall vending machine, and it offered passers-by 2 Coke bottles for the price of one. It won several awards also. Here in India, we have the example of Airtel, So this became a very famous tagline, एक हर एक friend जरूरी होता है. So they accepted that. It also gave them a lot of business. Then we have subculture within cultural factors that influence the buyer behavior that we are discussing. A subculture uh, refers to groups in a culture that exhibit characteristic behavior patterns just sufficient to distinguish them from other groups within the same culture. So, for example, they include nationalities, they include religions, they include people, for example, from various racial groups. So I shared with you that 2000 ethnic groups they reside in India. So if you study and if you go deeper, you will find that each of them has or will be exhibiting a different kind of lifestyle or the way they lead their lives. So now this can present interesting opportunities from the point of view of marketing. So why? Because subcultures have different attitudes, they have different beliefs, they have different customs, they have different languages. So it has implications. Like, for example, you will find that in the case of even countries like US, the packaging will be the instructions on the package will be available in several languages. For example, here in India, you will find that it's available in Hindi, and if you go down south, you will find it's available in the vernacular languages which are prevalent in that area. You will find English is also being used. Similarly, you will find as far as the various kinds of signs are concerned. So it has an important implication from the point of view of policy formulation by the government. It has implications on from the point of view of marketing also. So you will agree that multicultural marketing has grown. Why? Because different ethnic groups and demographic niches, they do not nowadays respond very favorably to the mass marketing or mass advertising that earlier was the norm. One example that I like to cite here is that of Kellogg's. Now, Kellogg's, you will find that it highlights or very prominently displays on the packaging that their cereals or cornflakes, they have crispiness. But the problem here in the Indian context is that we are not consuming this with cold milk. So the moment you consume this with warm milk, the crispiness aspect simply has no role to play. Simply it disappears. So in fact, similarly, we have to understand that what is in general the culture, then what is the subculture in the context of or the country where we are operating, because that will be having a significant bearing on the marketing strategy of a company. Now, then we have within the cultural factors that we're discussing, the last dimension to it, that is the social classes. So social class is a ranking within a society which is determined by the members of the society. So for example, we have the lower lowers, we have the upper lowers, we have the working class, we have the middle class, we have the upper middle class, we have the creamy layer, we have the upper uppers, and so on, depending upon which textbook or research paper you have gone through. You'll find different kinds of terminologies are being used in this context. So, what are the characteristics of these social classes, and why are they important to us? Those who are within the same class, for example, lower middle class, they will be behaving similarly in the context of dress, in the context of speech patterns, in the context of, for example, recreational preferences, in the context of services. There will be similarities. Now, individuals, remember that they can move up or down the social ladder. So people who belong to these various social classes, they differ in terms of brand preferences, in terms of even home furnishings, in terms of leisure activities, in terms of preferences for automobiles, in terms of media preferences. So for example, you will find that a certain class will be preferring to read newspapers or magazines, whereas others will only watch television, and that is okay for them. So we'll be stopping here today, and we'll continue discussing, and we'll discuss next the reference groups and other factors which influence buyer behavior in the next interaction. Thank you very much.